Hi, I'm Rodney A. Brooks. Welcome to RodneyABrooks.com. Today, got a special guest, my friend and colleague, Carl Mack. Carl Mack is a engineer by trade, but one of the things that we really want to talk to him about is Carl retired at 52.
51.
At 51, okay. Carl retired at 51. So we're going to talk about how he was able to do that, and we're going to talk to Carl about many things because Carl is many things. Carl, by profession, is an engineer. He was an executive director of a nonprofit. He's a historian, black historian, lecturer. As I said, Carl Mack is many things. Welcome, Carl.
Brother Brooks, always a pleasure. Thank you.
So let's talk about this. Retire at 51. How were you able to do that?
I can remember, Rodney, when I took engineering economy at Mississippi State. If I didn't learn anything else, when that professor said there's a relationship, the most beautiful relationship in the world is the relationship between time and money. And if you ain't got enough money, you better hope you got a lot of time. If you ain't got a lot of time, you better have a whole lot of money. So at an early age, I was disciplined enough that when I started working, to just squirrel away a little bit of money with the expectation that, I didn't, at 50 or somewhere in that area, I needed to retire. But if I wanted to do it, I needed to have some money set aside. So that's in part what I did. Obviously, when you start working, one of the things that I remember when I was an intern at John Deere in Ottumwa, Iowa, of all places, and I got to tell you, I made it 1% black when I showed up in Iowa, but I can remember walking down the halls, and there was a manager who stopped me as I'm walking down the hall. I'm just finishing my freshman year at Mississippi State in engineering, and I'm co-oping with John Deere. And he walked in and he said, Carl, I'm going to give you 3 letters that's going to change your life forever. And I looked at him and he said, IRA. I had no idea what an IRA was, individual retirement account. And so he explained to me that from the day you start working and you're able to put money into your retirement plan, he said, max it out. And by the time you get my age, you won't have to worry about money. I did exactly that. So that was part of it. That was part of the plan.
So basically, you listened to when people gave you advice. You were young, and you listened, which a lot of young people don't do today.
That's right.
But you sought, actually in some cases you sought out advice and you listened. So did you know all along that you were going to retire early? I mean, was that what you were planning for when you started out?
Absolutely. And I'll even go a step further. Before I ever met my second wife, before I ever had a child, I used to listen to people who I thought, like, wow, why are you still working? And they would say to me, I'm working because I got a son or I got a child in college and I got to pay for that. Well, I started looking into that and I discovered them 529s. And again, with the same principle, the moment that my children are born and they got a Social Security number, I start putting money away in 529s. And I figured, okay, Carl, the plan is that by the time they turn 18, they ought to have at least $180,000 if you put a certain amount in. So I started doing extra stuff, like I'd go out and do speaking engagements. And I do speaking engagements only to get a certain amount of money in addition to what I was taking out of my check, every paycheck, to put into their 529s. And I could tell you that when my oldest son graduated high school, he had $183,000 in his 529. So, you do things like that to get rid of that debt, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so let's go back and just a little bit of explanation. 529 plan is sort of a 401k or IRA type plan, but it's specifically for your child's education.
Correct.
It's a way for people to save. But okay, so let's add to this because you retired at 51.
Yeah.
And you had a family when you did it.
That's right.
Okay, you had 2 children, 2 young children.
2 young children.
Yes.
Man, my children must have been 6 and 2 or something like that. So they were very young when they retired. But again, we had the 529 in place. I obviously had my pension from when I worked at Metro in Seattle as an engineer. I had that going. And then I had an IRA account set aside. And then there was the stock market, right? And so for a long time when I was in Seattle, I always wanted to understand the stock market. So I didn't know anything about the stock market. I couldn't read the Wall Street Journal. I couldn't tell you what them symbols meant, up, down. I didn't know anything. So I literally started watching CNBC. Now, because I had to go to work every day, back in the day when everybody else was recording soap operas, I would record CNBC. And when I came home, I would just sit there and play it. Now, I got to tell you, Rodney, when I'm listening to CNBC, they might as well have been speaking Russian. I didn't know what they were saying. But the more I listened and sat quietly, the more that Russian became English, where I can understand some things. I began to understand, who really sets those prices in the stocks, and that is the analysts. You need to pay attention to the analysts. Pay attention to the fact that every company is going to report 4 times a quarter. What is it that they're going to report? Why does it make a difference if they hit their revenue, hit their EPS, but give poor guidance? So all those things begin to make sense to me. And at that point, I had residual income that I was going to use to invest. And I would tell you right now, the key to investment is not how much money you have, it's how much information you have. So I started staying with the information, started the investments, and they paid off. But now to specifically get to what investment, what happened, I had a young lady that worked with me when I was executive director of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, and she was very tech savvy. And so when she came in, we would talk about retirement, talk about investing. And she said to me, she used to call me Daddy Mack. So Daddy Mack, why aren't you investing in Facebook? And it didn't make sense to me. And she said to me, do you know how many people there are on the planet? I said, no. She says, it's about 7 billion people on the planet. And she said, do you know that 1 in every 7 person on this planet is on Facebook? And you're looking at what the internet was doing and taking away print media, magazines, and the likes. Well, where are those eyeballs going to go? And at the time, if you remember, Facebook came public about 38, but because they were a desktop-only platform, that stock dropped down to about 15, 17, maybe 17, 15 at the lowest. But Zuckerberg now said, oh, we're going to make the move to go mobile. And when they did that, that stock rebound back up to 38. I bought it at 38. People started talking about shutting down the economy under Obama. The stock dropped. I sold it from 49, sold it at 45. The next day, the crisis is averted, Facebook going up again. I jumped back in at 49. But when I jumped in, and this is the dangerous part that I'll say to all of you, that's, I was my threshold for risk is high. And literally every penny I had, I put it on Facebook at 49, so it had to be about $900 and some thousand at the time. But I put every penny on Facebook. And there was an advisor who was on the board of trustees. I was on the board of trustees of a college up in New York. And this guy works at Morgan Stanley. And he said, Mac, what are you doing? I put it in, and all I could tell you is there was a year, I think in 2013, where Facebook announced their earnings. It was a beautiful day.
So we're going through a couple of things. And I want to talk about debt. Retirement and debt, because one of the things we know is that when you retired, you paid off. Your house was paid off already, or you paid it off?
No. I still had a mortgage.
Oh, you still had a mortgage, but you paid it off in retirement.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so how were you? Is that something you also wanted to do? But I also want to talk about because financial planners are kind of mixed on. Financial planners generally say we generally say, if you go into retirement, do it debt-free. If you can pay off your mortgage without really drawing down your savings, then that's a good thing to do. But also, if it brings you peace of mind, then that's something you should look at. And for you, it was peace of mind, was it?
It was all of that. It was every piece of that. And what I want to tell y'all is that Brooks and I had a discussion about it. God, Brooks, what was that, 15, 20 years ago? You and I had a discussion over whether or not it was advantageous to pay your house off. But all I could tell you is that my whole life, I never wanted, I always wanted to have no mortgage, my entire life. And so when you think about retirement, the other thing that you have to think about is you could retire at any time. But if you got debt, well, you have to deal with that in retirement. So for me, it became clear as I'm managing money, as I'm managing my money, that if I had no debt, you just didn't need this exorbitant amount of money. Now, a lot of things happened at the time that I retired from there. It's been 2013. A couple of years later, my wife said, I want half. So we ended up getting a divorce, and now all that I had invested, we had to split it in half. And again, I still got these two young kids, but I got the 529 in place. And so that's the other thing, people, is that, if you're going to invest in the market, you're going to invest in anything, you better look for the downside of life, and you better have a safety net. So even though I was investing in the market, the safety net that I had was my 401k, because I couldn't go in and dibble and dabble with that. The money that I was messing with was the residual income that I had placed in the market. And so I got to a point where now I'm divorced. I had to take my assets and cut them in half. I still got two small children, but for the most part, I can deal with them on a daily basis. I got their education covered, but I got this mortgage. I didn't have a car note. I still, to this very day, I drive a Ford F-150, 2006, 171,000 miles, and I'm going to drive it till the wheels turn off. Believe that. So for those who want the $1,000 car payment, I ain't tripping. But, clearly I could drive what I want. But, it's just what I do. Just what I do. So now I got this mortgage. And I remember talking to my mama. And I said, Mama, that year I did real well in the market. But I had to pay Uncle Sam about $400,000 that year or so. But Mama said, Carl, baby, if I was you, I'd pay that house off. Don't wait. I had the money, but don't I? And the bottom line is I did. And when I paid that off, to your point, the peace of mind of not having a mortgage, no matter what. I ain't got no mortgage. I'm going to have a roof over my head. That was important. But the other part is I ain't got a car note. I ain't got a house note. My boys' education are taken care of. I got rid of cable TV, started streaming. I ain't got the cable bill. I started reducing those expenses, and it just made retirement a lot easier.